Hey, it's Kat from Restore Your Center and my love.
Dewey.
So today's topic, it's a little bit touchy, but once upon a time, I was very ignorant to the black struggle, and I thankfully Dewey loved me enough to be patient and answered all of my questions. So I had a conversation with a friend this weekend, and it kind of brought this topic about. Yeah, tons of topics here regarding the black struggle. One of them, we had a long conversation a long time ago, and one of them was basically, slavery happened a long time ago. Why, why are people still so worried about it? What I didn't get, what I didn't understand, I definitely understand now, is Dewey had said a lot of people say, yeah, slavery happened a long time ago, but people don't realize it's still fresh in my parents' time. It's only in his parents' time that there was still people getting lynched or people getting hosed, water hosed, and that was information his parents would tell him, and so it's fresh in his mind as well. So
Yeah, people always come with the slavery was a long time ago. It ended 100 years ago. This type of rhetoric, you must remember, civil rights movement didn't happen until the mid '60s. The civil rights bill wasn't passed until the latter part of the 1960s. My parents were 23, 24 years old when that happened. Um, at the end of slavery, guys, a lot of things happened. Certain policies came into play, so it wasn't like slavery ended in 1865. Everyone was kumbaya, happy together. There was a lot of policies that went into play that lasted all the way throughout the 1960s. That's one thing. uh, Jim Crow, segregation laws, all sorts of things that took place, the redlining, the sharecropping situation, the privatization of prisons, which caused mass incarcerations of blacks way before rap music and gang violence were, and drug dealing were a part of that, of the environment. So a lot of things happened, guys. It wasn't just like slavery was over and we were all good.
So we hear a lot about Jim Crow, but a lot of people just, I don't know, people don't actually know what it is. In your words, what is Jim Crow?
Well, I mean, they know what histories they want to know. They know the revisionist history very well. So I'm not sure why they would know about the Jim Crow laws. Basically, after slavery ended, blacks were continually disenfranchised and dehumanized, and laws like the Jim Crow laws popped up, that made it illegal for blacks to vote, illegal for blacks to have certain jobs, office jobs, just really disenfranchising black people. We couldn't be in the same restaurants. We couldn't ride on the front of buses. We couldn't drink out the same water fountains. We didn't have the same right to schooling that whites had in that
And
time.
these were laws put into place after slavery to
Yes.
continue this inequality, this,
Yes, guys,
mentality.
there's definitely systemic racism all throughout American history and still interwoven in the laws that we see even today.
Yeah. Um,
The last thing about it was a long time ago. Us Americans are so hypocritical when it comes to that a lot of times. We're the first ones to celebrate St. Patrick's Day and Thanksgiving. We love remembering things, but for some odd reason, when you talk about slavery, when you talk about things that are unsettling to certain people, all of a sudden, oh, forget about it, forget about it. And in many cases, these are things pertaining to the black experience in the country of America, and I think it's really sad. We learn history about Benedict Arnold and all of these type of people all day. George Washington and uh, all these figures in history. We learned that 9/11 and the Oklahoma City bombings were the first terrorist activity done on American soil, and that's totally not true. Everyone forgot about the 1921 Tulsa city bombings, Oklahoma City bombings in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where the black community, a thriving, positive, enriched, self-sufficient black community were bombed down with plane bombs, American plane bombs, just because they were black, thriving communities.
And they definitely did not teach me that in school anyway.
People were died by the thousands, women, kids, elderly, all died in Oklahoma, in Tulsa, Oklahoma. All for one reason, because there were black, self-sufficient, thriving communities. And these are histories that should be taught, not just during a month called Black History, but it should definitely be a factor in our so-called American history that we learn in schools today.
So that reminds me of when I had asked Dewey, I had said, how come, it typically the owners would be, Asian or white, and you rarely see black owned businesses, and that kind of reminded me. I mean, what I'm trying to get to is he's saying, so I remember him saying, so what are you saying? Are you saying that we're not business minded? And that's when he had brought up the Tulsa, Oklahoma situation where he said,
We've had thriving communities.
And it was called Black Wall Street, where wealthy black people decided to have their own community. And then what happened? On American soil, they were bombed, So from the very beginning, they had to create and make something out of nothing, again, and
after like the Black Wall Street situation, the Tulsa, Oklahoma situation, there were government policies put in place called redlining, and these policies are intentionally set for to disenfranchise the African American person. There have been many cases. There was a Pulitzer Prize winning article about this in the 1980s about how redlining affected the black economy as a whole, and how banks went against constitutional rights into in the banking industry of loaning eligible upper class and middle class blacks, denying them to loans that they gave to even lower, less qualified, lower class whites these same loans. This is why, and people wonder, oh, that was a long time ago, that was in the 1960s. But all these systems, that's why it's called systemic racism, all these systems that were put in place affects the present day now. Katrina was talking about, why don't blacks own more businesses? She thought we were confined to dancing and entertainment and sports. Very offensive way to look at us as a people, even though we started rock and roll, we started basically every culture that's in America right now, but that's for a different day. I told her, we don't only want to play the game, we would love to have a stake in ownership.
And you guys tried Black Wall Street.
Yeah, yes, but that's all systemic. The redlining forbid blacks to get loans to create stuff like entrepreneurship deeds, like stores and supermarkets and things of this nature. You can go look this up. Look up redlining. Look up the Pulitzer Prize written piece about how we weren't allowed to open grocery stores in our own communities, et cetera, but yet the government allowed whites. Later on, they started giving money to people of Asian descent, of Middle Eastern descent, to open businesses in black communities. They basically opened the books for everyone except for blacks. We're the only community that don't have the representation and ownership in those communities of anyone in the country. And it's not because we lack business savvy, or we don't want to own groceries and supermarkets and businesses in our area. It's because many times the bank have denied us of those loans to start those entrepreneur endeavors that could really help circumvent money through our area with through us and thrive like other communities have in the past.
And they'll give you debts. They'll give you loans that will put you in debt, but not the ones that will help create more money for yourself.
Yes. Billionaire Byron Allen, he's an actor, comedian, and philanthropist. Byron Allen has a lawsuit, a $10 billion lawsuit against the American government, and a $100 billion lawsuit against Comcast for these same type of systemic racist endeavors. So just look up Byron Allen. It's a long list of things that he's been fighting against for years, since the late 90s, regarding the same redlining tactic that's so often used to disenfranchise the Black community. Like Katrina said, we can go to the bank and get a car loan. We can go to a bank and get loans for anything that will put us in debt. But when it comes to getting loans from those same banks regarding entrepreneurial dealings that we want to dabble in, starting businesses, etc., we're too often denied. And that's not only me speaking from emotion. These are facts that you can look up and see. Versus the Constitution, what we're supposed to be allowed, versus what's happening, it's not even 0.1% of what's going on, and that's a problem.
And that's why Byron Allen has been winning his cases, because
Yes.
it's founded on how Black people were supposed to receive this, legally.
Yes, after slavery, every Black, due to the service, the free, unpaid labor that Blacks had did for centuries in this country, when slavery ended, every Black was supposed to get 40 acres and a mule, and that didn't even happen. And so that same philosophy of disenfranchising us and not giving us what we deserved, the banks took that same type of stance. After the American government made it a mandate that Blacks gets a certain amount of money through federal government for business endeavors and starting businesses and entrepreneurship, it has never even been 0.1% that have been allowed for Black enterprise in this country. And that's what Byron Allen had a problem with, and that's why he sued the American government for $10 billion because of that. And so we could talk about that all day. Check it out and see what you think about Byron Allen versus the American government, and trying to get these mandates met that should have been met a long time ago. A lot of things we see now are reciprocated effect from things of the past. So I'm not here to place blame on the white man or say that all white people are responsible for our situation in the past or now. But the problem is our forefathers didn't have us in they didn't consider us even human beings when the national anthem was made. So you can imagine how they felt about us as people, and you can imagine that they would never want us to have an equal and fair playing ground that whites and others in this country have, if we weren't even considered humans at the time. And these are things that I think people should understand. You may love your country, you may be patriotic, but at some point this country had no regard for the Black human. And therefore, we've been on an unfair, uneven playing field since. And there's a lot of circumstance that goes with that. And all we ask for is the same courtesy that every other person gets. And, that's it.
You were talking about national anthems. So what I didn't realize is the military, the Black people who have fought in war, right?
Yes, World War I and World War II.
They're, when they were sitting with the Nazis, what had happened?
Well, first of all,
The prisoners.
Everyone knows about the Tuskegee Airmen and great black platoons that fought in both World Wars I and II. It was so bad these guys, these black men fought valiantly for their country in Normandy and France and everywhere else all over the globe. Uh, when the white soldiers caught the Nazi soldiers or whatever, they were allowed to be in the part of the train with them as prisoners, and the black soldiers had to be tucked away in the back in really uncomfortable situations. The white prisoners, the white Nazi prisoners, got treated more fairly and more humane than the black soldiers who died for this country, shed blood for this country, and fought for this country. Another little known fact that a lot of you people don't know when you talk about your American history, when you're so patriotic to the flag and all of that, did you know the first person to ever die for this country during the American Revolutionary War was a black man named Crispus Attucks? Since you want to talk about the pledge and the flag, and I understand because this is a great country we live in. I love this country as well, but if we didn't have such a revisionist history and they told you all the truth about us all, we've all had so many great feats in this country: black, white, Asian, Indian, everything, Hispanic. We've all had great contributions, but for some reason the black contribution has been omitted out of the history. And you know, I think that's a real tragedy to everyone. But yes, the first person who died for this country in the American Revolutionary War against the Brits was a man named Crispus Attucks, a black man. So remember that also.
And redlining, not only is redlining happening with the banks, also with the school system. So a certain amount of money are allocated to schools and less money are going to the black school districts versus the others. So imagine what, if everybody was given fairly the same amount of money, imagine what could be accomplished, in terms of the students that will come about from that education.
Yes.
So that's something to think about, because basically what I'm trying to get to is people say, oh yeah, some people might think one race is smarter or not as smart as another, but also something that they have to consider is the funding.
The funding, that there's so many variables to smarts. I mean, humanity are all the same. The percentages, if you look across the board at humanity as a whole, the percentages are like this. They're not up and down. For instance, welfare. The percentage of blacks and the percentages of whites on welfare are virtually the same. The percentages of IQ in the different ethnicities are similar. I mean, no one's greater than anyone else. Unfortunately, the history and the system has been designed for certain people to thrive versus others not to be so well kept in that system. And I think it's time for us to understand that and persecute those type of fundamentals. We all need to understand that
somehow just try to get more of a level playing field,
yes,
with this awareness, so
yes, yeah,
we don't think so negatively.
Yes, we all need to understand that we are all victims of what we call white supremacy. Just from the prayer of a white Jesus entity, when you knew Jesus wasn't white with blonde hair and blue eyes.
Because people from that region are usually, sheep's wool hair,
darker,
dark skin,
different textured hair. Things like this further separates us all. Let's just be transparent about things and let people love one another. I was showing her years ago about how the media is misleading you. 7, 8 years ago, there was a lot of police killings going on all over America, in particular the state of Florida. I'll never forget that moment we were watching the news, which I stopped doing recently. I don't watch the news anymore.
Same, because of the
But
propaganda, and I was such a big proponent. I always read the newspaper and I watched the news, but now it's all propaganda and marketing now.
But I'll never forget, we were watching the news, and in the state of Florida, 3 police officers had been killed on the same day. And we're like, how? That's so bad. That's not right. I do not advocate hatred of police, killing police, any of that.
Yeah.
But this particular day, 7, 8 years ago, 9 years ago, however long it was, less than 10 years ago, 3 cops got killed in Florida. And the whole thing was they're in different cities in Florida. And guess what the media did? And not just one station, all the media stations. They said 3 cops have been killed today in the state of Florida. And they showed one picture of a black man. And I sat right next to Katrina, and we were watching this. And I ain't saying anything. I just want to see, did she see the mind trap? Did she see the media misleading you? And so I asked her, I said, Katrina, I guarantee I'll make $100 bet with you. I'll make $1,000 bet with you. I was so sure. I said, I guarantee there was 3 cops killed in 3 places in Florida. I guarantee you the 1 cop was killed by a black man, and the 2 they failed to mention or show any ethnicity were whites. I said, I guarantee you. And she said, no. I said, because if there would have been 3 black people who had killed 3 different cops, you would see all 3 of their mug shots. She didn't believe me. We got the names, we got on the internet, we searched it, and guess what? The 1 black man, yes, killed the police officer, and the other 2 policemen that were killed were by a white couple in Florida, 2 white people. And that's when she starts to open her eyes to see
More of an
how,
awareness, you know?
holy smokes. And I said, think about this, Katrina. They come to the news, 3 police officers were killed today, and they showed all 3 photos like they should have shown. You'd have seen a black man and 2 white people. How would that play on the American psyche? We all in the country would have been like, wow, these people are crazy. We would have really internalized this a total different way. And here's where I'm going with this. When you see young black boys running from police officers getting shot in the back 45 times, had you not let these images of police being killed and showing 1 black man when there were 2 whites that killed other cops that day, maybe you would have a little more empathy for the black kid who was unarmed and shot in the back 40 times. But the media has made you, when you hear a cop being killed, you think of a black person image. So when you see a black person unarmed getting killed, you have less empathy and less sympathy and less concern for that black. You call him a criminal. You say he must have been doing something wrong before you even hear the story. And that's all because of engineering. And it's the sad thing. If you knew that white people kill police officers too, and you've seen that enough in the media, not just in a black face every time a crime is done, maybe you might have a little more empathy for the unarmed black man that's killed with no regard.
Yeah.
And all these things are so subtle. They're so subtle. You won't even see it unless you're really searching for it, and that's the problem. I don't think most whites are racist. I don't think most whites are against black people. Unfortunately, there's a small few who pull the puppet strings of us all, and I feel like they definitely have an agenda to disenfranchise us and make us look bad in every way they can. And of course, there are bad people in every race. There definitely are black people out there that do the wrong thing, but that's not a high percentage. Just like there's a bunch of white guys out there, or there's some white people out there doing the wrong thing. When you think of the image of the white person, you don't think of West Virginian crystal meth labs, incest, buck teeth missing type people. You don't think of that as the white person. you think of like, oh, those are just trash that don't really belong to their race. They're not representative of their race.
Because the
When you
media doesn't highlight them as like they
as
highlight the black person,
yes,
you know.
yes, but when you think of black, many times you think of jewelry in his mouth, disrespectful, violent, felon, drug addict, violent type person, and that's only a small percentage and a small representation of our people, just as the crystal meth West Virginian representation is a small, minute representation